All right, everyone. Welcome to today's United Church of Christ Musicians Association Saturday Sharing. My name is Amanda Udis-Kessler, and I am on the UCCMA Board of Directors as your Director of DEI and Member Education, because we still believe in DEI because every human being is imago Dei, made in the image of God, and therefore DEI is a good thing. But today is member education, and today's member education is about the Convergence Music Project. We are so fortunate to have two of the core team members of the Convergence Music Project with us today. I'm going to ask them some questions. They will play a little music, and at the end there will be a little time for your questions to them. So I am going to ask Bryan Sirchio and Andra Moran to introduce themselves before I start the questions. Bryan, why don't you get us started?
Okay, I'm Bryan Sirchio. I refer to myself as the lead designer of the Convergence Music Project. So if there's one person, kind of the founder of sorts, that would be me. But Andra and I and Christopher Grundy and Richard Bruxford Culligan really started this about 12 years ago together. So I'm also an ordained United Church of Christ minister and have served pastorates, just ended one in July, a 7-year pastorate outside Madison, Wisconsin. So I very much understand the life and the needs of a local church pastor, and that's been really good for me. But I've also had a freelance musical ministry for over 30 years, where I've traveled around and used the music in one way or another to minister. So that's enough of an intro. Andra, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Andra Moran. I work and live in Nashville, Tennessee, where I serve Woodmont Christian Church, which is a Disciples of Christ congregation. You may know that's our sister denomination with the UCC. And I am a licensed pastor in the UCC or in the DOC, and I'm currently serving as the worship pastor for Woodmont Christian at the Bridge, which is our non-traditional service. Like Bryan, I have traveled around and done youth events and women's events, and well, I guess you didn't really do women's events specifically, Bryan, but I did, and our national things in our national setting for both DOC and UCC. So I'm glad to be here. Songwriter and singer, yeah.
And do look up both of their works on YouTube and look up their websites, which we will try to remember to get posted in the show notes for this a little bit later on when this goes up on YouTube. So to get us started, and I hope you all will maybe sort of switch off the order in which you answer these questions. But please tell us about the Convergence Music Project, how it came together. I know you've already said a little bit about who some of the other main players are, but just some background and context.
Andra, you want to take this one on?
No, you go
You
for
want me to answer this one? Okay,
Yeah,
so
you go for it.
well, as I said,
Thank you.
so Andra, Richard, Christopher, and I each had our own individual singer-songwriter ministries, music ministries, and so about 12 years ago, we just decided, we should collaborate instead of each of us off doing our own thing. And by that time, we had all, whereas we had all done individual solo music, we were also all writing music for congregational singing. And that was kind of increasingly our passion. And so we got together and actually we formed a little organization we called Shift and started doing some annual retreats in Wisconsin at one of the UCC camps there. And did that for 3 years, during which I also wrote the book, The 6 Marks of Progressive Christian Worship Music, which was a resource I created to facilitate the congregation between clergy in more mainline or progressive congregations and the musicians who were bringing in contemporary Christian music from the CCM world, the more evangelical music business in Nashville, and finding that the lyrics didn't fit who we were in more mainline or progressive. And by the way, progressive is probably not the word we want to be using, but it quickly communicates at least a general direction. But those songs weren't fitting. It was an awkward conversation for clergy to try to explain what those issues were. So I wrote the book to make that conversation or facilitate that conversation. And that book got around. more people found out about our efforts. People like Brian McLaren and others, and said, we should start a company that makes the kind of music you're writing about available on a wider scale. And that became the Convergence Music Project.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, really, I mean, that was the trajectory that our friendship took. So, I mean, just to kind of go back, I remember when I would interact. Like I met Brian at an event at Olivet College in 2006, and we hit it off quickly because we had so much in common. And the same with Christopher Grundy, who I met at an event in 2000, right, for UCC, and we were realizing, gosh, it's kind of lonely to be directing music for conferences, to be writing music, and it's such a unique and narrow set of skills in a lot of ways. Well, not narrow, but specific anyway, really specific. And it felt hard to be it was hard to explain to other musicians, even other musicians outside churches. And so really what this was all born out of was our friendship and our realization that, gosh, we could go much further if we worked together. And so I think, especially for your organization, it's so helpful to be reminded that when we do things together, we have each other's support, we have each other's encouragement, we have each other's energy. And so Convergence Music Project, CMP, has really grown with that energy, but it's founded in friendship and trust of one another and encouragement of one another. So just not wanting to underestimate that stuff is not just feel good soft touch things. I mean, that is germinating energy, right, to grow.
Yeah. And just to continue quickly with that, it started with the four of us, but then once we kind of put the word out that we're doing this, and opened it up to other artists and theologians to get involved, then it became much wider than us. And now, there are over 30 different artists who have music on the Convergence Music Project website, and more and more all the time. And Amanda, you're just getting some of your stuff available now. So we wanted to create a place where many different artists could share their music, and more of a collaboration.
And what was fun for us was artists were coming to us whose music we respected and enjoyed and loved, like Ken Miedema, for example. I personally was a little starstruck about it, and tried to play it cool, but but we just love Ken, and he's become a dear friend and supporter of Convergence Music Project, and has helped us vision forward in ways that we hadn't thought about.
So I'm going to actually transition us to our next question because you've sort of helped with that transition. How would you describe the kind of music CMP offers? How is it similar to and different from other progressive Christian? And by the way, I'm just going to interrupt myself and say I understand the challenges of the word progressive in this context, and since I don't have a better word immediately, I'm just
Right.
going to use it. So how is CMP music similar to, different from, and or even interrelated with other progressive Christian worship music that's available these days?
Andrew, you want to take a crack at that, or you want me to go?
Well, I would say, Brian's book that he referred to, The Six Marks of Progressive Christian Worship Music. I mean, Brian, you want to throw out the six marks really quickly? Because they really have been the benchmarks for how we evaluate music to see if it's a good fit for our work
I
together.
will, but none of the six marks has anything to do with the actual music itself. I mean, the musical style. And
Oh,
so
you mean more the
one
style?
quick response is there's no one style that is representative of it. What is unique about CMP is this focus on a particular understanding of the gospel message, the Judeo-Christian biblically based message,
Mm.
and a certain approach to worship. But there'd be many different musical styles, from rock and roll to chant to traditional hymnody. So there's no one sound that would give us away. But the six marks are
Can I pause you before you say the six marks?
yeah.
So actually, I guess when I was responding to your question, Amanda, I was thinking more thematically than musically in style, because I was assuming that everybody on this screen has had the experience of taking a hymn off the page and making it into something that nobody was expecting. Because because that's our bread and butter, right? Like we do that all the time. You can play it straight, but and just plunk down the notes. But you also know if you have to turn it into a communion piece or an offertory or something for the children's choir, it's going to be completely different. It's the same notes, it's the same melody, but your approach is different. So for me, yeah, stylistically, the music that's offered through CMP is all over the map, in terms of musical style, but it's the content lyrically that is what sets it apart more than anything. Do you agree, Bryan?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. I mean, is it? I don't know that it's even worth going through the six marks. I mean, I'll just
Oh, I
name them
would.
without. I'll name them without elaborating. The first one is praise, but also the full range of human experience. So that it just means these songs could be about any topic: lament, brokenness, justice, healing, all kinds of different things. The second mark is inclusive language, gender language with regard to the divine, but also human. And then we all talk about the binaries aren't serving us anymore. So getting beyond him and her, in every way, and being inclusive in general. The third mark is what we call progressive theology. And by the way, instead of saying progressive, I find myself more and more saying just and generous, using that phrase. But the progressive theology, we on the positive side, we stand for the beautiful big truths like justice and grace and mercy and discipleship and all that good stuff. It is what we deliberately do not focus on that really distinguishes us. And that would be things like penal substitutionary atonement theory, blood sacrifice, Jesus as the only way to God, disrespect for other religions, which is connected to the last one, Christian nationalism. I think there are certain things that you will not find reflected, in our music, and that's very deliberate. And that's one of the things that theologically sets us apart. And the fourth mark is an emphasis on both the individual and the community. So it's not just Jesus and me music, but it's music that calls us into community, and to being in this together. The fifth mark is emotional authenticity, and that gets into the whole balance between the head and the heart, making sure that songs have depth and substance, but that also move us, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So that balance, and it's songs also that don't embarrass people. A lot of the praise and worship music has a kind of a romantic tone to it that isn't really reflective of the way in which most people in UCC or other mainline Protestant disciples, other churches, tend to relate to the divine. And then
And
the
also
yeah,
the shaming element, right? So
yeah,
when you talk about embarrassing, right? There's that theological focus on shame in most of the contemporary Christian music that's coming out of Nashville.
yeah, and that would get us back into our theological emphasis, which is not about humans being wretched,
Right.
but embracing our original blessing and our original goodness, which I think is more accurate biblically, rather than songs that are constantly making us feel horrible and being then grateful that we're not being punished forever for our, you know, shameful humanness. But and then the last mark, the sixth one, is fresh images, ideas, and language. So we're trying to get beyond the worn out cliches and just find songwriters that have real gifts for music and image and language, and can take us into some fresh places and share the old story in some beautifully new ways. So that's it.
So
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to add something to
Okay.
this, even though I had not planned to say anything, only to ask questions. But having engaged with a fair amount of the catalog and been to a couple of the gatherings, one of which was just held this year, I think something else that makes CMP music, if not unique, then certainly distinctive, is the emphasis on singability and teachability, and indeed the sort of presence of, again, not exclusively, but substantially, music that can be taught without sheet music. So
Mhm.
there's, especially at the gatherings, there's a real focus on very learnable lines, avoiding rhythms that are so complicated as to be difficult for kind of average singers. Now, admittedly, at these conferences, there's a lot of pastors and musicians who are good singers, so maybe that's not fair. But I do feel like what I brought back from both conferences was very singable material.
Mhm.
So with that, and to give us an example of the kind of music that CMP offers, Andrew, why don't you pick one piece, tell us which one you're going to do, and sing and play it for us live.
Sure, I'll be happy to. I think one thing I want to say, though, in response to you, Amanda, is I mean, certainly we're not setting out to make something that's simplistic or dumbed down, but we also recognize, I recognize I have an elementary school age child, and I recognize the changes in music education in our country in the last 20 years, right? And the budget cuts that affect and impact our arts programs in all ways. And so we're not dealing with, at least I serve a fairly large congregation in the South, which, is, it's its own context, obviously, but so many singers now have never learned to read music. They're not reading off of the hymnal. They're not singing in parts. In our traditional service, only a handful of the older people sing any of the parts. And so I find that I'm teaching while I'm leading worship. I'm teaching why is music so important? How can it be not so much performance but engagement with the divine, right? But I don't want to lose musical complexity or nuance or beauty. Not complexity for complexity's sake, but complexity so it's just not like background noise, but so that it pulls us in. So I'm a pastor's kid and grew up learning singing hymns, and so I love hymns, and I did a bunch of hymn arrangements. But this is a twist on "Be Thou My Vision." So this is not the same melody, but it's based on the same text and the same feeling. So I wrote this song actually at and for De Chola Center, which is a UCC camp ground, an outdoor ministry center, retreat center in Wisconsin. It goes like this. Be our vision now in all that we do. Let us see you. Be our vision now in the shadow of night. Let your presence be our light. Be our wisdom now, filtering through our words and the things we do. Be our wisdom now. Give us power to choose the way that is right and true. Here in this moment and forever, we want to love more. Amen. Here in this moment, together, help us to love more. Amen. Be our loving now, heart of our hearts, the center of who we are. Be our loving now, honest and true as we were first loved by you. Here in this moment and forever, we want to love more. Amen. Here in this moment, together, help us to love more. Amen. Be our vision now in all that we do. Let us see you. Be our vision now in the shadow of night. Let your presence be our light. Zoom applause. Yay. Thank you.
Okay, so now we want to get practically a little bit into the CMP website and memberships and so on, because really, um, as a songwriter and hymn writer myself, the questions I asked previously are of great interest to me, but mainly this is a resource. I mean, the reason I wanted to have this session is because it's a resource for UCC and other mainline church musicians and music directors. So, however you want to split this up is great. What is the website URL? We don't have to see the website, but what will people find on it? How do memberships work? What do they cost? What does a subscriber get if they become a member? And we're doing pretty well on time. So, anything that feels important to you about that piece of this is a good time for that.
Okay, I can get us started with that, and then Andrea, you chime in. Okay, first of all, the URL, the website is a Convergence MP for Music Project, convergencemp.com or convergencemusicproject.com. Either one of those will get you there. We wish it could be cmp.com, but that was already taken, and we'll get you something frightening. Um, but it and so what's the great value of it is, in a general sense, two things. One is that the site is really extensively indexed to make it easy for musicians and clergy to find exactly what you're looking for as quickly as possible. So you can search. There's a search bar, but there's also categories on the site where you can search according to topic, or scripture verse, or musical style, or church calendar season, on and on and on, or specific artist or specific song title if you know it. But so if you're looking for a song for a baptism that has a gentle feel for it, that's guitar driven, all of those things are options that you can find there. So that, as I said, the purpose is just trying to make it easy to find what you need. And then you can click on a song and then listen to the MP3 recording of it, and then look at previews of the lyrics, a guitar lead sheet, a piano arrangement. Almost all the songs have those. Quite a few have videos, lyric videos that can actually be downloaded and shown in worship. And that really became useful during COVID for churches that couldn't do music together. And then there are other, some have congregational inserts, some have PowerPoint slides, but as many products related to a song you'll find there, depending on what the artist can create. So then people can download those and purchase them individually, kind of a la carte. And any download also includes copyright permission to use the song in the context of worship. So in addition to the extensive indexing, the real selling feature and the curated theology is making copyright compliance very easy. So any song that you get from our site, you have permission to use. And because all of our artists own their own copyrights. And so that's we're finding that is a kind of a great feature for those who have to chase down copyrights all the time.
Another thing is that
yeah.
you're actually investing in the kind of artists that you want to see be able to make a sustainable living and,
Right.
and to continue to create this work. Because, I mean, that's something that we really have noticed is it's actually generating enough income for some of our artists that they're not having to do part-time babysitting or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right?
And if you have more questions, like how does it work with onelicense.net or CCLI, we can get into the more complicated aspects of copyright compliance if you want. But just in a general sense, if you get it from our site, you can use it. Is the point. All right. And then the other main feature is that churches can become members. And that means for an annual fee, and since we started in 2016, the annual fee for a church more than 100 members is $199 for the year. Less than 100 members, it's $149 for the year. And if you pay that, then you have access to every song and every related file on the site for that year. and copyright permission to use it. So it's a really great value, and we need to raise that, which we will be raising it probably to about 279 and 199 for larger and smaller. But we're waiting until the website. We're about to shift the entire website to a new platform, which will make it even better, faster, more powerful, give it a bit of a facelift. So we're waiting until that. So anybody who gets in before that can get grandfathered in at the original price. So what other questions might you have?
Joan just added in the chat, it looks like you're looking for more composers. And so I would speak to that. Yes, we're always eager to connect with other people that share this vision for what we're trying to build and what we're continually building, right?
Yeah.
And Bryan can tell you more about that process of submitting a song and connecting with us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, without getting into the specifics, I mean, there's a portal on the site for submitting songs for consideration. And yes, we are always looking for new songs and new songwriters to be in relationship with and to welcome into this with us.
Including Amanda. We love Amanda's
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Thanks. One thing I do want to mention that in my experience is a newer direction that you all are taking. Is years ago when I first looked at the site, pretty much all of the music on it was original music by singer-songwriters. And in my talks with these folks recently, it's become clear that they're going to be moving to expand to include more hymn texts to traditional tunes. So that is certainly a resource that UCC congregations will find useful, because for those who have members who may struggle a little bit to learn new music, but do know the old tunes, but may not require the old theology of the old texts, for those of us like me who, among other things, write new texts to old tunes. Can you say just a hair about that kind of piece of the initiative?
So
Well,
I
you
have,
said it perfectly. Go ahead,
yeah.
Andrew. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you did say it perfectly. Thank you. I have two new texts to familiar tunes. Every time I feel the Spirit, and I wrote something in response. George Floyd was killed on a Thursday before Pentecost on a Sunday, and so I wrote. I didn't know what to do with my congregation with that, and so I wrote a new text to Every Time I Feel the Spirit, and that's available on the Convergence Music Project site. In fact, Frederick and Amanda just sang it with us actually last week, this morning, a week ago.
Yeah.
But then also, I have one called "As We Gather, Draw Us Nearer to," what's that? Beach Haven or da 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 da. So we are looking for different ways to use those hymn settings because they are so approachable for so many of our congregations. Yeah.
Yeah, and it underscores really the heart of this whole thing is it's about the message, and so if churches are kind of predisposed to not like or want new styles of music, and really love the traditional hymnody, or don't like learning new things, then having a fresh text to a tune that they're familiar with and love already is a beautiful alternative, right? And so it's really breathing life into some of these traditional hymns to have some either newer, fresher, more immediately relevant lyrics going along with them, or in some cases some better. I mean, there are some hymns that people are not singing because the theology is at best outdated, and maybe even not great theology from our more progressive perspective, period. But we love the tunes and those songs. I mean, one of my favorite one is "This Is My Father's World." I love that hymn. But in most churches that lean progressive, we're not going to sing it because of the exclusive male language, etc. So to have some fresh language, but to bring that tune back to us, there are just so many that hit a lot of heartstrings that are sacred for us and beautiful. And it's a lovely way to kind of breathe new life into those.
And familiar. I mean, down here in the South, you hear everybody from Alan Jackson to Elvis's version of "Washed in the Blood," for example, right? But
Yeah.
so people are familiar with the melody, but they have this kind of sense of, well, we probably shouldn't sing that. Well, all right. So what can we do with that? How can we hold that differently?
So I do, before we move to the next question, want to lift up an exchange that was had in the chat in case people are not watching it. Joan asked whether CMP has choral anthems for choirs. And Andra, why don't you provide your answer out loud to the group, and then we'll go to Michelle's question.
So yeah, so we have some. We don't have a lot of it, but we have some. Ken Miedema has some of his things on the site, and that's just a growing area for us. So interested in that for sure. And some of my songs, for example, have harmony parts written in either 3-part or 4-part. Just because I'm a harmony nerd, and but they're not choral, but they could be used for a small ensemble easily. Unless you have a really big fancy choir, they'd probably work great.
Yeah.
And yeah, anything else, Bryan, you think?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. We're getting more and more requests for choir songs that choirs can do, anthems. And I just want to say we're very eager to develop that. And if anybody listening to this has gifts for arranging songs for choirs, we would love it if people would take one of our more popular songs or whatever and actually create a choral arrangement of it, and submit that and work with us. The door is wide open for that. So we need more of that. Yeah.
So I'm going to move to Michelle's question, also in the chat. What are some of the ways you introduce new songs to congregations? I know it varies for each particular song, but I'm always looking for new ideas. And I'm so glad, Michelle, that you asked that, because, again, just having come from one of the national gatherings, that is one of the tremendous gifts of those gatherings as a practice. So if either or both of you would speak to that, that'd be great.
Go ahead, Andrew.
There's the practical ways that you probably already know. Add a new tune in as a prelude one week, then maybe the choir sings it. Then a couple weeks later, you act like it's not new and they've heard it before, because they have, and kind of sneak it in on them, right? So that's a practical way. I have used the children's choir many times to teach one of these songs. Like, the children's choir sings it as an anthem because kids are not afraid to try new things. And then then a couple weeks later we sing it as part of our opening singing and worship. But what I generally find is because a lot of the songs that I'm writing in particular, and songs from CMP, they're more stepwise intervallically than hymn tunes, for example. I mean, anybody that's listening to the radio or shopping at a grocery store where they're playing top 40 music, there's a familiarity with just intervallic chiming in, right? So I tend to teach songs leading with the confidence that they'll get it, And I know that maybe that sounds kind of stupid, but I go into teaching a song trusting that the congregation can do it, and encouraging them along the way, and saying, like, all right, hey, we're going to learn a new song. I know you've got this, but listen to me one time, sing this verse, and then let's do it again. Some of my friends, like Brian and Christopher, will often teach songs line by line. I have never been able to do that very well. And I'm always kind of amazed how they can go, now it's this line, then go back to the beginning. Because the way that I'm wired is I move forward to the next step. So that's a little harder for me. But it's effective. It's an effective way to line out a song. And then call and response, I'll often use a song that's call and response. That really goes well. Or if I have another instrument in worship in addition to what I'm playing, either from piano or guitar, I'll have them, like, we have a flautist that often joins us in worship, and I'll ask him to play the melody. And I guess, like, the main thing is I'm a good singer, but and I have to remind myself not to prove it to everyone when I'm teaching a song, right? So what that means is, like, let me just stay right with the melody. Don't put any fun little tricks on there. Anything. Don't make it too interesting. Make it really approachable. And if you offer something that people feel safe to approach, I find that they're usually responsive.
And I'll just add that that's a great question, and it's a big question. You know, in terms of like best practices, how to bring new songs to congregations, how to actually teach a song, how to teach a song in the context of worship without breaking the flow of the worship. You know, all of that, and that gets into specific. I mean, call and response songs, how difficult or accessible a chorus is. And if you know, I'm a big stickler. If the melody is at all complex, you should provide notation one way or another. It's too frustrating for people otherwise. So how to get notation projected? That's a cutting edge for a lot of us. Something we really need to provide more, and we will be in CMP. Andrea, you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so Mark Miller is a big friend of CMP and a trusted, you know, songwriter that we all love, an incredible choral arranger as well. Um, you know his music, I think. Say yes, you know it. If you don't know it, you better go get to know it because it's really good. But Mark was leading a bunch of sessions at our gathering last week in Columbus, Ohio, and Mark did exactly that, where he projected the melody line, and I think it was only, as I recall, it was only the melody line. Might have been
Mhm.
like a two-part thing, a little alto thing, but basically what he was doing was taking from his from digitized versions of his music. You could also do this with your phone, but taking a screenshot of just that line, trimming the edges on his phone, and then importing it into his PowerPoint. It's kind of a cumbersome task, but it's not impossible for something like that. In my context, I mean, I think it's just really important to know the context you're working with. In my context, people are far more quick to learn something by ear because they can't read very well. They can't read notation very well. So just know who you're working with. In my context, another way I forgot to mention that I sneak stuff in on them is in the pre and like we have a prelude and a postlude in our services, but our prelude and our postlude is playing a Spotify playlist or a recorded music playlist. And so I'll often put songs that I'm scheduling for the coming months into that playlist so they're hearing it as they're gathering or as they're departing. And that those go underneath our announcements. And I include those in our newsletter or on our church's Instagram page and social media pages. I include those songs as the background music for our posts. So whether they realize it or not, they're getting a little sneak attack, you know?
Yeah. And again, it's a great question because to me, what it really comes down to is how do we encourage congregations to really sing, to go for it, to sing full voiced, and to really so that music can actually do what music was created to do in the context of worship. And so often it's so staid and reserved and tentative that we
Right.
never really experience the fullness of it, you know. And so that issue of how do we teach songs well, but also get congregations to really sing is hugely important. And we're going to have entire retreats given to that, those topics, and also more retreats for songwriters, people that are creating new music also. Um, so
And some of
it's,
that's
yeah.
personality, don't you think? I mean, like I think for me as a music director, as a music leader, and as a worship pastor, I'm always trying to find ways. I mean, this is beyond musical, but it functions musically. I'm trying to think, how can I build my congregation's trust of me? And that happens in relationship, right? Like if I feel like, oh, you know, Frederick is a really great singer and I'm not much of a singer, and but I know that Frederick likes me and cares about me, and we have a donut after church or whatever, I'm a little bit more likely to try to you know, trust Frederick saying like, come on, we're going to sing this song together. So I think don't underestimate the relationship building that then inspires confidence building, because ultimately what we want is we want for people to feel free in their musical expression to deepen their worship experience. It's
Mhm.
we don't want them to be great singers. We want them to be in worship. And the freedom that comes with that, I think, is born out of trusting the leadership of your worship pastor or your music director.
And I'm actually going to throw in an additional trick that I use to introduce music in my tiny little congregation. Um, More often, maybe than we should, the song we sing right after the offering is new or newish to the congregation. And often during the offering, I will play it. I will play the chords and the melody and kind of get it into their ears, and we will sing it immediately after the offering. And I have found that really helpful. So the issue of having something be timed right next to when they're going to do it, personally, I find a little bit helpful. Okay, so the last kind of substantive question, I'm going to read the question as I originally wrote it, but it could go many directions. So beyond Convergence Music Project, including it, but also beyond it, what do you think the future holds for progressive Christian worship music? What trends do you see? What should music directors at UCC, churches, and similar churches be thinking about and looking for?
Hmm. Well, I will say, I'm not aware of any other organizations that specifically promote and create what we would call progressive Christian worship music. There are a few bands and other websites, Porter's Gate, for example, or Common Hymnal. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but and Maverick City Music, a little bit. They focus a lot more on at least diversity in terms of race. But I'm not aware of any other companies or networks that are specifically promoting progressive Christian worship music. Are any of you? I mean, I'd love to hear about them and collaborate with them if possible.
Particularly with the congregational lens. I
Yeah,
think you're exactly right that there are bands that are doing this and saying, here, learn our songs, right?
right,
Um, and one of those bands, for example, is The Many, but then our songs, their songs are all on our site. We're partners with The Many.
right.
Um, so, and I have a band, and Bryan has we have individual music that we use and promote. But for congregational context, I think it's really,
Yeah. And
really
part of why
important.
CMP came into being is because this doesn't exist, and so when we started writing about this and getting clearer with what we mean by this particular approach to worship music and what's unique about it and why it fits churches like ours better,
Yeah.
um, nothing like it existed. I mean, so I was responding to a need that I felt myself, that didn't exist. No one was meeting it. No one was filling it, and so we kind of stepped into that. And so, as small and tentative as we've been for these last almost 10 years, we're sort of the only game in town when it comes to this. And that's why I finally decided to leave the full-time pastorate and to give my full-time working energy to this. It's grown like pretty significantly just on its own, and is really, the need for it is exploding. And what I have realized is that what we're really talking about is a new genre of so-called sacred music that we are giving birth to. And I have people that work with CCLI and big licensing agencies, and they are all getting increasing numbers of requests for songs that have the kind of theology that we're talking about. And in fact, some of the presidents of the Christian music industry record labels themselves I've also spoken with them, and they all agree, big picture, this is the direction that the Spirit seems to be taking the whole industry. That there's a redefining of how we understand the gospel message. The more conservative elements are going to dig their heels in, and they will remain conservative and not like us, But there are more and more people who are looking for a more just and generous expression of the faith, and music that specifically is committed to that.
Hmm.
So I'm going to turn Andra's comment in the chat into kind of a question for the two of you. So this was part of an answer to the question of how to introduce new music. And you wrote, maybe also reminding the congregation throughout worship that singing is a gift they offer to God, and you're so glad they're offering it. One of the subtopics of the conference last week really was how music in worship, singing in worship, is in some ways a different beast than having a gig out on the road. I mean, it's for a different purpose. It requires a different engagement and a more complicated engagement with our ego as musicians, and so on. And even though the person who sort of gave the main workshop that I attended that addressed that topic is not on the call today, I do wonder if either of you would like to speak a little bit more to the particular challenges and opportunities when music is being used in this worship context, not because, everyone on this gathering knows this, but I think hearing it articulated in a fresh way would be a great thing. So if either of you would like to speak to that, that'd be wonderful.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Andrew, you want to take a crack at it?
I feel the same way. Which workshop did you go to, Amanda?
Oh, Christopher Grundy's Congregational Song one.
Oh,
So the idea that just, those of us who are musicians are used to, we like to have fans, we have big
Oh,
egos, that kind of thing. But what we're
right.
doing in this context is really different. So the music has a different purpose, that requires us to engage both with the music and with each other in ways that are a little different than, being on the road gigging or whatever it may be. So
Yeah.
that's sort of more what I'm asking. It's a question about the role music plays in worship, and how we can support that in our churches.
well, I work musically both in and outside of church contexts. And I think of those two experiences very differently. So when I'm I'm really never performing in church, like ever. You know, I know sometimes people will say, well, it's okay to kind of have a performance piece during the offertory or a performance piece during communion. And I understand that that's different than communal singing. Maybe I'll add some of my licks and tricks in that, right? But even still, I'm not performing when I'm at church. When I am sharing music in worship, I always use that phrase, sharing music, whenever I'm talking with the congregation. Because in church, we're not supposed to be performing. We're supposed to be offering and sharing and drawing people in together. When I'm at a club gig in Nashville on a Saturday night, definitely performing. Totally different on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night. And I want to be, one of the things that I use personally on Sunday mornings is I try to picture myself like a window frame. I have a specific window that, is important in my childhood. And when I'm getting myself centered before I go to church for worship, there's the practical element of practice, right? I practice so that I can be available to God. So I'm not trying to remember what that chord was or how does that melody go there. I want to show up prepared because that's part of my spiritual discipline of offering myself to God during worship. So being musically prepared, that's one thing. But then when I'm in the few minutes before I leave for church, I usually sit quietly, give myself 2 or 3 minutes to pray, and I picture this window and I ask God to be the light that shines through the window. So there's a very clear differentiation for me. I am not the light. I'm just the window. So, and that helps me remember that I'm not performing in worship. I am centering myself as a way for God to connect with God's people.
And all I'll add is, yes to everything Andrew just said. And what I heard in everything you just said is that musicians and song leaders in the context of worship need to be darn sure we're doing our own ego work, so that we're not there for the wrong reasons. But what are the right reasons? That's what I'm much more interested in. And that's, to me, what this is all about is experiencing and encouraging and being deliberate about the spiritual power of communal song. That something happens in a community when people sing together. I mean, together. I mean, and there's physiological stuff. There's great studies now. I mean, that talk about, entrainment in the brain and the sides of the brains coming together, the physiology of sound and frequency and what that does to our bodies, and how that all can open us up emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, so that we can hear a message or experience the presence together. So, I mean, music sung together has power. Uh, the late Phyllis Tickle said that nothing undergirds the message of social transformation more than the power of a song. And Brian McLaren often talks about the power of music toward spiritual formation. That the things that we're singing get into our being in a place and in a way that spoken word doesn't. So we want to be deliberate about creating an atmosphere in which spiritual experience and mystical things can happen. Music plays a role in that, but also undergirding those messages and bringing them deep into our beings. So there's so much that could be said about all of that. But I feel like in most churches I have been in my adult life, including those that I have led, we have not tapped into the deep power of music, and we miss it. And that's what I'm passionate about. I want us to experience what music alone can do when we sing together and listen together. Yeah. Andrew?
And yeah, and I want us to be reminded how y'all on the screen, you probably know this instinctively, but the science backs it up. Music lowers our blood pressure, for instance. You know that when you go visit somebody in the hospital and you hum a little tune to them, or when you calm a grandchild or a baby, all of that. You're doing that work week in and week out. Never underestimate your own power that you're bringing into worship with your music. And like we just discussed with Amanda, make sure that you're using your powers for good, right?
So I'm gonna, just because we're getting close to time, I'm gonna point to Robin's comment in the chat, invite you to look at that. Songs for the Holy Other is a wonderful hymnal. I'm honored to have a couple of hymns in it myself. I'm gonna ask us to wrap up the formal piece of this. Bryan, would you please grace us with just the chorus of
Sure.
Dream God's Dream? Because we are short on time, and I see Joan has a question, but Dream God's Dream is a wonderful piece. We use it in my congregation. Please give us the chorus of that.
And Bryan, you
Okay.
wrote this, right? You wrote
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Dream God's dream. Holy Spirit, help us dream of a world where there is justice and where everyone is free to build and grow and love and to simply have enough. The world will change when we dream God's dream.
Thank you. Thank you. Joan, looks like you had a question. Go ahead.
Oh, mine's a suggestion. All this talk about communal singing, there are people who feel they can't sing. And I remember a workshop at a UCCMA conference a long time ago. It was called the I Can't Sing Choir. And this director had a choir for people who he said they feel they have a bad voice, or they've been told when they were
Yes.
young that they don't sing well and don't sing. And people are embarrassed, and he has a choir just for those people. And I don't remember what techniques he talked about, but I do remember he had someone from the group volunteered to be the person who can't sing and sang with someone who does sing, and they sang together some sort of Broadway tune or whatever. That was so lovely. And they, the one who couldn't sing was singing. So keep that in mind. The I Can't Sing Choir.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, me too. And what you just alluded to, I mean, the woundedness in people around why and how and when they lost their song is a
Yeah.
deep, deep thing. And that's part of our work, is to bring healing to that. Yeah.
Any last comments or questions? We have just a couple of minutes left.
The non-traditional parallel to that would be to start what I we were just talking about this at the conference last week, to start a garage band, you know. So you might not be quote unquote good enough, which means really skilled enough or practiced enough to be in the worship team, on the worship team, playing guitar or something like that. But maybe once a month or once a quarter, maybe you just want to express yourself musically, and so you come to garage band practice and you develop some more skills, and then you just go for it. I think that's kind of fun.
All right, everyone. Thank you for a rich time together. I'm so grateful to Andra and Bryan for joining us today. Um, if there are no last thoughts, we're actually going to end just a hair early. As a reminder, UCCMA members, I am still looking for opportunities to develop more of these Saturday sharings. So if you wish to offer one, get in touch with me. If you have needs for which you think a Saturday sharing should be developed to respond to them, please get in touch with me. And all blessings to all of you on at least what in Colorado Springs is a beautiful day. I hope it's a beautiful day everywhere. And best wishes to you all.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, everybody. Great
Thanks for
being with
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah. God bless. Take care.